1. Foundation of the Grey Havens and of Lindon. In his 1955 appendices to The Lord of the Rings, JRR Tolkien wrote of the Second Age, "These were the dark years for men of Middle-earth, but the years of the glory of Numenor," in what Christopher Tolkien identified as his father's first attempt at establishing a time scheme, later to become the Tale of Years. The Second Age was described as the Black Years, or the age between the great battle and defeat of Morgoth, and the fall of Numenor, and the overthrow of Sauron. These vastly conflicted times, and, in particular, the monumental tragedy represented by Numenor, greatness established but then brought low and destroyed, resulted, through the chronicling of the Second Age, in both the shaping of the history of Middle-earth and the physical reshaping of the whole world, a story that provides a powerful and far-reaching prelude to the great drama of the War of the Ring. The story begins in the closing days of year 587 of the First Age. In the great battle and the tumults of the fall of Thangorodrim, there were mighty convulsions in the earth, and Beleriand was broken and laid waste, and northward and westward many lands sank beneath the waters of the great sea. In the east, in Osirion, the walls of Ered Luin were broken, and a great gap was made in them toward the south, and the gulf of the sea flowed in. Into that gulf the river Lune fell by a new course, and it was called therefore the Gulf of Lune. That country had of old been named Lindon by the Noldor, those of the second clan of the Elves, and this name it bore thereafter. At the end of the First Age, the Valar held council, and the Eldar in Middle-earth were summoned, if not commanded, at least sternly counseled, to return to the west, and there to be at peace. Those that hearkened to the summons dwelt in the Isle of Eressëa, and there is in that land a haven that is named Avalone, for it is of all cities the nearest to Valinor, and the Tower of Avalone is the first sight that the mariner beholds when at last he draws nigh to the undying lands over the leagues of the sea. Not all the elvenkind answered the Valar's call, but dwelt still in Middle-earth, lingering, unwilling yet to forsake Beleriand, where they had fought and labored long. Gil-galad, son of Fingon, was their king, and with him was Elrond, half-elven, son of Earendil, the mariner and brother of Elrose, first king of Numenor. Commenting on this in his 1951 letter to Milton Waldman, Tolkien wrote, "We see a sort of second fall, or at least error of the elves. There was nothing wrong essentially in their lingering against counsel, still sadly with the mortal lands of their old heroic deeds. But they wanted to have their cake without eating it. They wanted the peace and bliss and perfect memory of the West, and yet to remain on the ordinary earth, where their prestige as the highest people above wild elves, dwarves, and men was greater than at the bottom of the hierarchy of Valinor. They thus became obsessed with fading, the mode in which the changes of time, the law of the world under the sun, was perceived by them. They became sad, and their art, shall we say, antiquarian, and their efforts all really a kind of embalming, even though they also retained the old motive of their kind, the adornment of earth and the healing of its hurts. We hear of a lingering kingdom in the extreme northwest, more or less in what was left in the old lands of the Silmarillion under Gil-galad. In the beginning of this age, many of the high elves still remained. Most of these dwelt in Lindon, west of the Ered Luin, but before the building of the Barad Dûr, many of the Sindar passed eastward, and some established realms in the forest far away where their people were mostly Sylvan elves. Thranduil, king in the north of Greenwood the Great, was one of these. In Lindon, north of the Lune, dwelt Gil-galad, last heir of the kings of the Noldor in exile. He was acknowledged as High King of the Elves of the West. In Lindon, south of the Lune, dwelt for a time Celeborn, kinsman of Thingol. His wife was Galadriel, greatest of elven women. She was sister of Finrod Felagund, friend of men, once king of Nargothrond, who gave his life to save Beren, son of Berehir. Later, some of the Noldor went to Eregion, upon the west of the Misty Mountains and near to the west gate of Moria. This they did because they learned that Mithril had been discovered in Moria. The Noldor were great craftsmen and less unfriendly to the dwarfs and the Sindar, but the friendship that grew up between the people of Durin and the elven smiths of Eregion was the closest that there has ever been between the two races. Celebrimbor was lord of Eregion and the greatest of their craftsmen. He was descended from Feanor. Galadriel did not go west at the downfall of Melkor Morgoth, but crossed Lindon with Celeborn and came into Eriador. When they entered that region, there were many Noldor in their following, together with grey elves and green elves, and for a while they dwelt in the country about Lake Nenuyil, Evendim, north of the Shire. Celeborn and Galadriel came to be regarded as Lord and Lady of the Eldar in Eriador, including the wandering companies of Nandarin origin, who had never passed west over Lindon and come down into Osirion. Of Galadriel, it is said that she was strong of body, mind, and will, a match for both the lore masters and the athletes of the Eldar in the days of their youth. Even among the Eldar, she was accounted beautiful, and her golden hair was held a marvel unmatched. And the Eldar said that the light of the two trees, Lorelin and Telperion, had been snared in their tresses. From her earliest years, she had a marvelous gift of insight into the minds of others, but judged them with mercy and understanding. In the account of the visit of the Fellowship of the Ring to Carscaladon in the February of year 3019 of the Third Age, we have a description of Celeborn and Galadriel. The chamber was filled with a soft light. Its walls were green and silver, and its roof of gold. Many elves were seated there, on two chairs, beneath the bole of the tree and canopied by a living bow. There sat, side by side, Celeborn and Galadriel. They stood up to greet their guests, after the manner of elves, even those who were accounted mighty kings. Very tall they were, and the lady no less tall than the lord, and they were grave and beautiful. They were clad wholly in white, and the hair of the lady was of deep gold, and the hair of the Lord Celeborn was of silver, long and bright, but no sign of age was upon them, unless it were in the depths of their eyes, for these were keen as lances in the starlight, and yet profound, the wells of deep memory. Writing in Unfinished Tales, Christopher Tolkien opined, "There is no part of the history of Middle-earth more full of problems than the story of Galadriel and Celeborn, and readers wishing for a better understanding of that story should consult the history of Galadriel and Celeborn, Christopher's lengthy essay on the subject, which is included in Part 2 of that work. Upon the shores of the Gulf of Lune, the elves built their havens and named them Mithlond, and there they held many ships, for the harborage was good. From the grey havens, the Eldar ever and anon set sail, fleeing from the darkness of the days of earth, for by the mercy of the Valar, the firstborn, could still follow the straight road and return, if they would, to their kindred in Eressëa and Valinor beyond the encircling seas. At the end of the First Age, while the Eldar was summoned to take ship for the west, a different fate was presented to Elros and Elrond, the sons of Eärendil, who were descended from a union between the Eldar and mankind and known as the Peridil or half-elven. To them, the Valar gave an irrevocable choice to which kindred they would belong. Elrond chose to be of elvenkind and became a master of wisdom. To him, therefore, was granted the same grace as to those of the high elves that still lingered in Middle-earth, that when weary at last of the mortal lands, they could take ship from the grey havens and pass into the uttermost west. And this grace continued after the change of the world. But to the children of Elrond a choice was also appointed to pass with him from the circles of the world, or if they remained, to become mortal and die in Middle-earth. For Elrond, therefore, all chances of the War of the Ring were fraught with sorrow. Elros chose to be of mankind and remain with the Edain, but a great lifespan was granted to him, many times that of lesser men.